All right, so we will call the December meeting for the Longmont Housing and Human Service Advisory Board to order. The first agenda item is public invited to be heard. And I don't believe we have anyone, but just double checking if there's any Brenda in the waiting room.
I don't see anybody in the waiting room.
Okay. Second item is approving the minutes from the October 11th, 2022 Housing and Human Services Funding hearing. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes from October 11th? I need a motion from somebody. I'm
Motion to approve.
okay. And a second.
I second.
Okay. All in favor of approving those minutes, please raise your hand. Leave them up so that Brenda can make sure she gets everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And then Catherine, are you abstaining since you weren't at that meeting? Okay. So
Everyone but Catherine.
okay. The next item. So those are approved. The next item is approving minutes from the November 10th, 2022 regular meeting of this advisory board. We have a motion to approve those minutes.
Motion to approve.
I second it.
Okay, all in favor of approving those minutes, please raise your hand. Okay, so we've got 4-4, and then Catherine, you were not at that meeting? So abstaining as well? Okay.
Okay.
All right, so approved. All right, next item, CDBG CV progress report. I think that's why Molly is here.
Yep, I'm here. All right, let's see if my share screen works.
We gave you co-host.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
This should be it. Okay, does it look okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, so I know it's been a little while since the housing group has been with you, except for that last short order meeting that we appreciate from a month or so ago. So I wanted to check in. Most of our annual funding process stuff that we do is heavily weighted towards the first half of the year. And then often we go out for funding cycles a couple of times a year, so we would see you more often. But this year we really did only one funding cycle, just the way the dollar values panned out and what the needs were. So we didn't really see you that much later in this half. So I wanted to just touch base and give you an overview on a program that's been going on that you haven't maybe heard so much about. And then get you just feedback if you have any as we move forward. So this is for the CDBG CV funds. See if I can advance my slide. There we go. Okay. So just as a reminder, if you're not familiar, this was a CDBG program out of HUD that was in direct response to the pandemic. So it's called CDBG CV for coronavirus. In September 2020, received $768,364 in funding. Out of that, we are allowed to use 20% for admin, and then the remainder goes to projects and programs. So really looking at about $614,000 at minimum to spend on programs, and then maybe some admin if we don't use it all and repurpose it. The kicker with this one is 80% of the funding must be spent by June 30th, 2023. So we're kind of in go time here. And I'll go into some of those details. So here's the expenditures that we've done in 2020, 2021, and 2022. We have spent in total $336,629. That is 44% of our total funding amount. So it's been slow going. It's really been a challenging, funding source to go through. So based on where we're at, we need to spend $278,000 and change by June 30th. So we've had to rearrange funding around to make sure that we hit that and don't get this money recaptured. So that means that 278 we have to do by the 2023, and then the rest we would finish by 2024. Really, I think the actual end date of the funding is 2026, but we would not expect to go that far. So that's 153,000 we'd have to spend at that far end of the program. So the first thing that we funded was individual assistance through rental and utilities assistance, if that was included in rent. This also does include rent arrears and late fees and security deposit issues. So we ran this program through the R Center. In 2020 and 2021, we ended up supporting 58 households with this funding source with 119,000. But we really did combine it with our regular CDBG fund. So we assisted more than 100 households with about $130,000 of rental assistance. At the end of 2021, the R Center said that they were going to shut down the program because CDBG funds are so hard to spend, when at that time, really easy funding sources like ERAP was coming out that had far less restrictions and less paperwork to do. So the R Center chose to shut down. So that was complete in 2021. And there's been still rental assistance for COVID impacted people has continued this whole time. It's just being run primarily through Boulder County's ERAP program and some others. So when that happened, we had to pivot and come up with a new way to spend the funds. And at the time, right around the end of 2021, the city's utility bills were like something like $2 million in arrears in terms of number. And this was maybe over 1,000 accounts totaling 2 million in arrears. So people were clearly struggling there. So we put together the Fresh Start program, which is a utility billing assistance program. It pays city and Excel bills, but it only pays for the essentials, power, gas, water, sewer. It does not pay for trash, our greenways fees, our stormwater fees, things like that are on city utilities. But you also have to show a COVID impact. So you have to show that you had a financial loss because of COVID. And but some of that was pretty generous. Like if you had children at home when school was not in person, then you had higher utilities. So we called, there's some flexibilities there, but generally we do have to demonstrate a COVID impact. And these folks are the ones we're serving are at risk of shut off. So they're on the shut off list. Their bills are 37 days or more overdue, and it's real. So so far since we started, our applications opened in November 2021, and we did our first credits in January of 2022. So far we've spent 153,000, almost 154 on 171 low-income households, and the maximum assistance amount was $5,000, which we definitely had some people all the way up to that amount. So that's really wonderful. We also have, just in the last several months, we have a new resource navigator in community and neighborhood resources, and she's been really working diligently whenever she gets in touch with people that need help, pointing them in this direction. So we've really had an uptick recently. So we've got $69,250 left in that budget to spend, and we plan on closing the program in March. This is partly because it started to slow down, but then of course our navigator helped it uptick. But we want to get through people through the primarily the winter months, and then it's just not spending fast enough to meet our expenditure threshold. So we have to pivot at least partially again. So here we are pivoting again. So the Recovery Cafe, if you're not familiar with that organization, but they're operating out of the bottom of a church right now in town. They provide substance addiction counseling, job training, and other supports, and it's really a gathering place for those in recovery. They are looking for a new facility, and because of the drug our substance abuse and recovery aspect of it, it is in line with the requirements of this COVID specific funding. So we've been chatting with them about how to help them come up with their new facility. So what we're working on right now is doing an add-on at the suites, supportive housing, because they do have some clients at the suites. It's pretty ideally located near transit and some other things that they really wanted. And there's a lot of room there. So we are working through creating a new CDBG CV project to rehab the suites. It's really more of an add-on with a breezeway connection because it has to be connected to the building to be eligible for CDBG. But it would really benefit just their presence on the property there, period, would benefit the whole property and all the residents there. And then of course the residents could access the service and it would still be accessible to everyone else in the community. So we have pivoted 272,000 towards that project to help them get started with architectural design and legal review because that's a LIHTC property. So we really do have to go through all the investors and make sure everybody's okay. But they'd be able to spend that 144 quicker than Fresh Start and help us meet that 80% requirement and then spend the rest of it over time. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. What is LIHTC?
Low income housing tax credit. So when you have a tax credit investor, and that means they're on for 15 years and they get to review and approve everything.
Got it. Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So the challenges with this funding source is tying the impact to COVID. At this point, a lot of people that if they needed assistance, they've found resources. That doesn't mean, I mean, there's still a lot of people that need assistance, but tying it back to COVID has gotten more challenging at this later time. There's other sources that are easier to get than CDBG. We have that tight expenditure deadline that's making us pivot around pretty every several months. Housing new construction is not eligible. We have a ton of those projects going on, but that's not eligible for CDBG. And then we have to do substantial amendments to the action plan each time that we move budgets and projects. So we've had to do, we're on substantial amendment number 5 to our 2020 action plan. And those haven't come through the advisory board because it's really it's the city's COVID funding, similar to the ARPA money. It's kind of a city council directed set of projects, and the projects are so limited that we could even consider. So every time we do that, we have to go back to council. So here's a summary of what we've budgeted for each of these programs, what we've expended to date, and what is remaining to spend, and then broken up by how we're going to get there and not lose the funding here in June versus spend on later. So I'm going to leave this page. Next I just have questions, comments, or advice. I'm going to leave this one up though to help tell the story a bit. I really just wanted to give an update on how this is going, who we're serving, the challenges that we're facing. It's really a high maintenance program. Takes a lot of staff time to make all these pivots. So hopefully we don't have to pivot. I do expect we'll have to pivot one more time at least, because if we can't we're just gonna have to make sure if we need to put more back into Fresh Start or release some admin to get projects done by June, we may have to do that one more time. So I'll just pause and see if you have any questions or comments.
Molly, I do have a question to start us off. CDBG, you mentioned that there's easier funding sources. Do you have a sense of whether other cities or municipalities that have gotten this funding are facing the same challenge? Exactly the same. There's conference calls every month talking about, okay, now what did you come up with to use your CV funds? There's just a lot of funding sources out there, and CDBG is one of the trickier ones to use. So yes, we are in the same boat as others. Okay. Other questions or comments from board members?
Why Recovery Cafe?
Because we needed something that could tie back to COVID, spend the money in time, and in a large enough value. And they had approached the city already, wanting to originally, it's kind of been a process. They originally approached us asking if we could loan out the space to them at the suites, because the suite has so much extra meeting space and common usable space. And so they were going to do that. And they were looking for a site, and we knew that. And then when we really figured out that Fresh Start wasn't going to take us all the way to the end of this funding program, we're like, well, why don't we put it into Recovery Cafe? And so they were on board. And so the status of that is they just closed, or a request for proposals period just closed last Friday, and they're interviewing architecture firms tomorrow. And so they're moving right along. They should have some preliminary drawings by February, just getting them squared away. Like, how much is this really going to cost? Is this really the right site? All of those types of things. So we've got backup plans to the backup plans, if anything regarding the equity investors or the site feasibility or anything like that.
Yeah, that was gonna be my
pivot.
question, Molly, because like, I mean, timing is, you
Mhm.
said you had to get by June. And so
Mhm.
March is not, I mean, that's not a lot of,
Nope.
not a
It's
lot
really
of
tight.
time. So.
Well, luckily, the 144,000 of that of Recovery Cafe that we'd have to spend by June, I mean, their proposals are higher than that. So
Okay.
for architecture, so we can at least get architecture under our belts with this funding. And then, if it turns out to not be feasible, we're very careful to structure the engineering and architecture RFP so that it would be eligible to be converted to like a planning activity under CDBG, a feasibility study. So it could still get covered even if they end up having to pivot to another site. So the suites is certainly not the easy route, but if we can make it work, it's definitely worth it. So we're doing everything we can. We've got exit ramps built in if it ends up not being feasible, and they could just purchase something and we could do it that way, but hopefully it works out.
Sounds like a lot of creative problem solving, to not lose, $300,000+ in funding. I'm curious if there are other, I know that you've mentioned it, so I'm curious if there are other things outside of Recovery Cafe that are sort of on the back burner pending, those you mentioned exit ramps, but it sounds like some of that is like them purchasing or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Are there contingency plans that are not Recovery Cafe
Nope.
right now?
Our contingency plan is Recovery Cafe. Purchasing land is a really quick and easy thing to do, especially with CDBG comparatively. So if this doesn't work at the suites, we'd know by February, and they could pivot there. There's more funding involved, by the way. So the city has dedicated some a piece of ARPA funding. We've been doing some back end swapperoos to make sure as we get these projects to their, when they're ripe for arranging all the funds. But so the backup plan is Recovery Cafe pivoting to another location, or if Fresh Start is doing pretty well with our navigator role, we could definitely reopen that program, or not close it in March and put some more in. It wouldn't cover the full amount that we need, but we could definitely do that in a pretty quick and easy order if we needed to at the last minute to get the funding all the way there.
And I assume Longmont is not administrating, the rental assistance because of staff, not adequate staff.
We didn't, it wasn't us that got the funding. It was, or do you mean the art center piece?
Yeah.
When we were doing our center.
Yeah, I mean, why didn't the city just do it like they're doing the utility bill assistance? I assume you advertise people in the community that have the need and can exhibit the COVID relationship apply, and then you give them the funds. And why couldn't the city just do that with rental assistance still?
So the problem was the Boulder County ERAP rental assistance, they had a lot more funding available and their requirements were much less restrictive. So when our center was already, that's their bread and butter. And so they had a lot of people coming to them for rental assistance, and they had these two programs sitting next to each other and be like, why would we fight to get all of this documentation from these folks if we can do ERAP in lickety split? So that was that challenge. And then when we considered what should we take it in-house and do the rental assistance ourselves, we certainly could, but ERAP was already swooping everything for rental assistance.
And we didn't have, so the navigator came because of ARPA funding, which came later.
I see.
This was already.
We didn't have that role at the time.
Yeah, we didn't have that role at the time, the funding for that staff person, because that's being funded through ARPA, not through the CARES or the CV funding. So that was another piece to it, it's just timing as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, it sounds like even now, though, there would be, even if there was a possibility of doing that, like there's much easier ones. And so like community orgs like our center might not want to put people through that level of paperwork and so forth when there's easier sources and sounds like plentiful sources.
So something to consider, Molly, is, ERAP is coming to an end. I'm not sure if it's ending before this is, but I've heard there's a lot of concern with ERAP coming to an end. It was like they got like what, 19 or something million?
Something crazy.
It was a lot of money that I forget the exact number that they received. But it is coming to an end, and there are challenges. I mean, I've talked to the Art Center, and they're seeing people come to them. So I think the big challenge at this point is the COVID connection too. Oh, Chiquita is on board. Any more questions for Molly?
Thank you, Molly, for presenting this and helping us understand how these funds are, the challenges with these funds, but also the ideas that staff have come up with.
No problem. Thanks for chatting with me on it. And if you ever, if we get into another pivot situation, I'll bring this back, and if we need new ideas, we'll certainly engage you all.
So Molly, while we have you on, as we look to the near future, do you have an idea when the board should be, because when you bring stuff, right? There's usually a lot of reading and detail to do.
Yeah.
Any idea? Can you give the board just an idea of when they should be ready that we're going to be diving into the housing?
Definitely. So every year we'll bring the CAPER, which is the annual the annual report of our CDBG and affordable housing programs. We'll bring that each year in March. So that will most likely be the next time that we have something pretty major to bring. And then we bring the inclusionary housing snapshot, which is also a prior year annual report. Hopefully the goal is to do it at a similar time, but between March and June, certainly. And then typically our first major funding cycle happens in the March to June timeframe, because we have a requirement to get it through City Council by the end of June. So those are our three biggest things, kind of all come in that March to June timeframe. And then if we open up the funding cycle either again or a little bit later, then that might spread it out a little bit, or we'll just have an extra one more in the late summer or fall.
Yeah, because later on in the agenda tonight, we're going to be looking at the annual work plan and just I just wanted to show it to the board and get feedback. And so this is really helpful as we're gonna talk about that.
Okay.
I mean, staff is the one that creates the work plan. That's the way it's been done so far. But I just wanted to bring it to the board so you can see what's coming in 2023, get some feedback, and having Molly share kind of their timeline is important to the development of the work plan.
Okay. Yep, March to June is heavy for us.
Great. Thank you so much, Molly.
Okay. Let's see if I can get out of my screen share now. I'm here. Maybe. Working on it.
I mean, I'm guessing Brenda could probably just, kick you out of the meeting. but,
Yeah.
That would be a little unceremonious and perhaps not all that helpful. I don't know.
Can you still see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah,
I don't know what just happened to Zoom. It's shrunk.
so you see that green button down the bottom, it says share screen?
That's the
It-
problem. My Zoom page looks
It
pretty
moved.
skimpy.
I think her share bar moved.
I'm gonna stop.
Just stop me.
Yeah, I said I can stop your scare. I'm gonna go ahead and do that.
Okay.
And I'm gonna
I can't-
share. Because I'm next on the agenda anyway, so I'm just gonna put this up.
Okay. All right. Thanks all.
Have a good one, Molly.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
All right, but now I gotta figure out how to get to the presentation mode.
That was the trouble when I was coming out of presentation mode, then all my buttons on Zoom disappeared. Okay. Good night, everyone. Have a good one.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Am I next on the agenda? Is that just next?
You are. It's the funding process review debrief,
Okay,
right? Is the next item. So if that is you, Aliberto, then we are all good.
so yeah, that is me. I did create a PowerPoint for it, but it's really just a bunch of questions. So I'm gonna treat it much more like a conversation and just get as much feedback from the board as possible. We've done this every year, and I just wanted to, talk to the board about the process. I have some questions around the training and I have questions about the hearing. And then if there's other things that the board wants to think about, I know we're going to be looking at the allocation formulas. That's not on this piece because I know that is what we talked about at the November meeting. So we're not going to talk about the allocation formula tonight because I know that that's coming. I really focus more on the process with questions that are focused on that so that we can kind of discuss what we'd like to see, what we could improve. Yeah, so that's what I'm focusing on tonight. So can I have thank you. All right. So only a few, but there's lots of questions in them, so we can have the conversation. So really, we're going to go over how we did this year. We changed things up this year as far as the process is concerned, and I want to get some feedback on that and also think about the future because the next thing after this is the work plan. So there's really two big aspects of the human services funding that the board is not necessarily in charge of, but very much engaged with. One is the application review training, or how we look at the application. The actual application itself, the board can suggest. But as I told the board, we do the application in collaboration with Boulder County and City of Boulder. So that's a little more, we can suggest things, but if we have to work within that collaboration. If they don't want to change it or they have other ideas, then we kind of have to work within those parameters. That being said, for next year, we could change what we have control over is our own evaluation, right? And the training and all of that. So that's one aspect. Then the other thing we control is the hearings and the hearing schedules and how those hearings happen. And so those are the two things I want to focus on tonight. And of course, if the board has other ideas or other suggestions, we will take copious notes and work on it for the next year's process. Okay, so let's start with the application review piece. So I did a training back in July, and I don't know if anybody remembers it. But I would love to know from you all, from you guys from the board that reviewed them, was it useful? Should we change the training date? Is July not the right date? Is it too far from when you get to actually see the applications? Are there parts of the application and the evaluation process that you think need more focus from the training? So just wanted to start out and have that conversation with the board.
Well, I started out knowing nothing. So everything was useful for me in that training because I knew nothing. So it was invaluable, obviously. There's no way I could have done anything without your help.
Okay.
So it was extremely useful for me.
Any other thoughts on the training?
I probably would prefer more, but
More training?
yeah,
Okay,
It did, Eliberto, I thought it was good that we got ahead of it because, the time for actually doing the evaluations gets really, gets a bit hectic, gets a bit full. That said, July might have been too soon still, in terms of like linking it to, when the applications are being done. So, but I don't know, I think Kim and Catherine, you are both a bit newer to the review process, so I don't know how you feel about that timing. Yeah, go ahead, Kim.
I thought the training was helpful. This is the second time I've done a review. And I think no matter how much training happens, there's always like when you go in and you start finding different places where the information is, that just comes with use. So I think you did a great job of like the overall picture of what to look for. And then I think there's only so much you can address with the training. And a lot of it is just going in and kind of figuring it out to how to score those applications.
Yeah, Catherine.
Yeah, as far as like the timing worked just fine for me. This was also my second cycle, and I think a lot of this is just practice. I found the second cycle much easier simply because I had the experience. And, like Kim, I think a lot of this just comes with practice, and getting into the system is really what I needed to get the hang of it. So as far as timing was concerned, I think it worked just fine for me.
okay. So we'll think about July or August next year. Okay, so late summer is still good, because we usually release, I think the plan will still be to release sometime either, I know the board has wanted to release earlier. I think the board has shared that before, and I will advocate for that with our partners, but a lot of it depends on their staff capacity and all the things that they have to accomplish. But yeah, depending on, we typically release sometime in July and it's due sometime in September, early September, but if we can move it earlier, I will do that.
Robert has a question.
Yes, Robert.
I would have liked a trial application filling out.
Like you filling it out?
Yeah, other than reading it in the thing.
Okay,
Is actually sit down with someone and they would say, okay, how would you rate this?
okay,
How would I rate this with the form in front of me and on a bogus, nonprofit kind of thing, just to give me a kind of hands-on sense. I had kind of invented, or at least think about it when I was reading as to how that would work out. It would have been easier just to have the form and to do a trial evaluation on some bogus operation. That's just me, though. I would have felt easier about filling out the evaluation. As it was, I filled it out and I wasn't sure I did it quite right.
okay. Well, so that's one piece that we could add is I could do one-on-ones with board members that want that. I think that would take quite a bit of time of a meeting to actually sit down and go question, but I'd be happy to.
Yeah, it'd be like, well, you didn't mention this. This is a
Right.
part of it. We also consider this as part of it. You didn't mention it, so you didn't think about it. There's
Nuances, yeah,
I want more hands-on, more personal, involvement. Just to feel comfortable about what I'm doing.
okay, all right. Definitely something we can consider. And I guess that's actually, we're getting into that second part of what besides this more hands-on, potentially one-on-one or one-on-two, what else could we do to strengthen the training?
I think, I think a little, this is just me thinking back, is like, I think actually reviewing some prior applications and how they were scored, like, I think, so Robert mentioned hands-on with that. And, I think there is an element of being able to do that in the software that we're using.
Okay,
But I also think just seeing an application, right? Like even seeing a previous year's application from somebody like, and walking through like, okay, here's the question, the question on our evaluation is, how well does it meet, our priority areas, right? And so even just talking through like, okay, well, I see this information in these 3 places that they've answered, and even having like a printout of it and like kind of highlighting that and, working through that could be helpful. Every agency does it a little bit different. So, it's hard to say, that, looking at one is enough, but I do think that even just like walking through an application, because we, for good or for bad, we all get them. And then we don't actually talk about individual applications, right? We all put in our scores separately, but we never actually talk about like, what did they answer well, or what didn't they answer well and why? And,
that's a good point.
So we
Yeah,
end up sort of roundabout getting to that when we get the total scores, right? Like, and we kind of go to it, but we never actually go through like the application to talk about it.
And yeah, I will say when I served in the Longmont Community Foundation's application review committee, I did it for like 6 years. Yeah, we didn't do hearings like this board does. We actually go do site visits. Like I would, there'd be 2 readers assigned, and then we come back and report on both the application and the site visit to the applicant. So yeah, I think that makes good sense to actually go through an application together and say, well, why do you think this is a good, how would you score it and why? Right? If you think, because I've been noticing as I've been putting together the council communication, there's still some challenges with outcomes that some of our nonprofits had. And I was, and maybe just going through some of those, say, okay, so why do you think this is a good outcome and why did you score? Because it's really the board that reviews the outcomes. I mean, I read them, but it's not part of my evaluation.
Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe, Kim, go ahead.
Yeah, I also wonder, like, if I'm scoring them too harshly compared to others, like just kind of norming it a little bit so that I know that I'm doing it right and not being too critical.
Yeah. And I think particularly in the context of the fact that we have, not everyone is reviewing every agency, or we didn't this year, right? And so norming it across us can be really helpful.
Okay.
We're never gonna get all the way there, right? Like, our perceptions are gonna be different, but at least sharing some of that. Catherine.
Yeah, I think that would be incredibly helpful also, as well as sometimes when I'm scoring them, I think some of us who have more experience and have done site visits with some of these groups and talked to them personally, we have more information on some of these agencies as well. So, sometimes I feel like when I'm scoring somebody, I'm like, I know more about these people than other people do. So I'd like to know, I guess I'm saying the same thing you are, but the more experience we have and the more times we go through these cycles with these groups, we're going to have more of our personal input with them, if that makes sense.
Right. So this should be a 2-month type of thing. I'm just, and again, because I helped put the agenda together, I'm thinking forward to the work plan, right? This may be a 2-month type of training where we take part of it and we do kind of a general overview, and then we really dive into what Caitlin and what Robert's talking about doing that hands-on and that norming, going through an application and discussing how we would score it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I really like that idea. Yes, Robert.
I would like an on-site visit. I find it's difficult for me to hear the heads of some of these nonprofits, and all you see is a talking head. And to me, part of it is to get a feeling for the environment that it's happening in, what the building, what it, you know. A more hands-on personal look at the nonprofit. And I know because of COVID, that was not possible, but if it becomes possible, I certainly would like to make on-site visits and see the,
Of the applicants?
yes.
Okay,
Applicants are
think-
who we've
I mean,
funded,
that would
because,
help me move up higher up the scale, I would think.
yeah, that was my question too, Eliberto, is because, you know, I don't know that we can ever do public hearings as like site visits, but we do site visits and they have been, you know, those are basically folks that we have previously funded. Not
Correct.
part of the application cycle. I cannot imagine, and maybe this is incorrect, I can't imagine that we have sufficient time across board members to be able to do site visits for everyone who applies for funding.
yeah, I think, I was gonna say, so we did site visits at the Longmont Community Foundation, but there was like 30 of us. Right, so each of us would take a small amount. I think it's a good idea, and I'm not sure about the feasibility, to Caitlin's point around, you know,
You wouldn't have to visit all of them, but I'm some sort of schedule to do some on-site, just so you get a feeling for sort of how it works. I mean, talking heads, you feel cheated a little bit.
Yeah, so I think that then is really less about reviewing applications and more about those site visits. So I think, you know, we can probably revisit that when we talk about those site visits, but I don't think that, like, you know, in terms of how the city administers funds and the application review, we can't just selectively visit applicants in any way. And with, you know, 1, 2, 3, 5 board members, 6, you know, I don't think there's any way to visit 60 different applicants
Right.
in the time that we have, right? But the
Yeah,
schedule.
I think
Yeah.
time would be prohibitive because of just how fast everything moves. It would be, I think it's not a bad idea, and we have some time constraints and capacity constraints that I think would make it
I
difficult.
understand, I'm just saying.
Yeah, no,
asking what would help, and that strikes me as something that would help.
And we can strengthen our site. I mean, we're gonna, Chiquita, council member.
Hey, hello, everyone. Just listening, sorry I came in late. I think that everybody you all are making really good points, and I have to think about, now that, of course, being on city council, I understand how the staff is so limited in what they can do. So I also like the idea of the mock application. So what about if when you're doing the training, you choose a time or a date for those people who can actually go to a nonprofit, and then you can point and talk to, maybe do like a mock interview or a mock whatever, like we did at the community foundation. You know what I'm saying? What does that look like?
Like a
What
mock
do you look-
hearing type of thing?
Yeah, like a mock hearing type of thing. And
Okay,
and just one, you know, just so that we all can understand what we're looking for and what we need and things like that. And yeah, because there's no way, of course, you can do all of that. And then not only that, even the one-on-one for you, Eliberto, is crazy. I don't even know how you even have time to do one-on-one with everyone, to be honest. So, however, you know, we can do like, and maybe we can even record some stuff, maybe not in the nonprofit, but maybe you can, maybe we can talk to someone in communication. I don't know, you know, someone in the department that can record you doing the training. And then that way, something in certain areas of the training, we can go back and go look and rewind and go back and look and see, what was this part again? How are we supposed to do this again? So I was just listening to you all, and I think maybe possibly a mock, like going to a nonprofit. We can do our center, which is very close. And then kind of go and you can show them you know, what you look for, like we did at the community foundation. Things like that. That's all. I don't know if that makes sense or I'm just talking crazy. I'm talking crazy, huh?
No,
Okay.
not at all.
Sorry, I
Well-
came in from Lafayette and running in, plugging up my computer and everything, starting.
It's all right, no, I mean, it's something worth considering, and we're gonna be talking about. In a little bit, we're gonna be talking about the work plan, and we can think about where we can fit something like this in. Or if we make it part of one of our site visits. Part of the challenge, of course, is that because we're a public board, if we were all to show up at the art center. We'd have to publicly notice it, and so that's the other, whereas the community foundation, Keita, you and I and 5 others could go and. You know, so what?
Yeah.
But if this board were to do it, then it has to be
Yeah.
publicly noticed and all that kind of stuff that we have to, you know.
Yeah, I just think maybe offline you and I can talk about
Sure.
possibly how we can go into one of these nonprofits and do a little recording of the whole process of a site visit.
Okay, yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
All right. Thanks.
All right, so are we good with the application review training? Okay, then I'm gonna move on to the hearings now and just debrief with you all. What did you think of them? Were they useful? And I just have some other questions. So I guess the first question is, how useful did you find the hearings in helping you score your program applications? I don't think we've ever asked that question before.
I think they're critical.
Okay.
I think when I read the application, I come up with questions and points of clarity, and then when I go into a hearing, I'm able to get that more information that sort of Catherine was talking about, that you just don't get reading the application. So I think they're pretty key in having an equitable score.
Okay.
I found the hearings helpful, obviously. I would have preferred to talk to people directly than through a screen, but I thought it was very helpful. And the questions were, there was time for questions and replies, so it was it was a good choice to do that on a Zoom with a limited number of board members, I think.
So we used to do them in person. I mean, we could go back to that. We used to do them in person.
Yeah.
And we would start a little earlier, and we have money in our city budget because we would purchase dinner for the board.
Sure.
And we have dinner here, and then the people would show up. So it used to be in person, but you know, because of COVID, and then because it's convenient, right? We decided to stay because people can do it from their home. They don't, because I mean, there were nights that we were here pretty late.
Yeah.
Right, and people had to drive home and stuff, so I guess, go ahead, Kevin.
I was just gonna say, you know, I do think that to the extent that we've got nonprofits in particular that are, you know, that are working on, you know, particularly with COVID, with fewer staff members and so forth, like the things that we can do to make it easier. You know, I also think about the fact that the vast majority of staff across nonprofits are, you know, women, people who aren't necessarily paid as highly, that sort of thing. And so like the things that we can do to make it more accessible for folks to do it, whether that's, you know, making it available so that they don't have to get childcare for the evening because they don't have to drive into Longmont to City Council building for a 15-minute hearing. I think it's actually a fairly big equity component of how we serve the organizations that are serving our community.
Okay. And I think that's we're getting into that second question about changing the format to virtual, and it sounds like it meets a couple of our goals around equity, around, you know, even though, yeah, we do lose, I mean, I do think you lose a little bit doing the Zoom thing, but I think it can also be very useful and helpful and be robust. Now, the big question is, this is the first year we tried it, is, you know, what do you all think of how we changed it up to where not every board member had to read every application, and board members were given the opportunity to choose the area, focus area they were the priority area they were most interested in.
I would say that helping, if there were like two board members doing the evaluation or talking to people, that each of us get some questions written out so we could take kind of ping pong the questions back and forth. And if that way, we'd be sure to cover what has to be covered rather than hoping that we bungle into the right question. That's all.
So there was always, the good thing is there was always at least two per category. Some categories had three, but you know, Brenda and I, and Erica, when we first set this up, we wanted to make sure there was at least two board members for
Yeah.
per priority area.
But I would like some free questions that you feel like, you know, board, like the constitution of the board or money available, or, you know, something like that, that we could ask every person that we do the interview with.
Okay, and we'll get to that. That's part of the questions too. But I think Kim had her hand up too.
Yep, go ahead, Kim.
I felt like the quality of my evaluation was better because my attention wasn't spread and my time wasn't spread. So I think I did a better job this go around because there were fewer to evaluate.
I plus 100 like that. I felt like I was able to, I felt like I could dig in more to the agencies that I was looking at, spend more time with each application. And then, you know, the other thing I noticed was on the hearings that I was on, you know, there were really great questions. And I think when everyone is doing every hearing, you know, it obviously, like, folks get tired and like, and, you know, in years past, we've had, you know, a couple of people driving all of the questions for agencies where it definitely felt like, you know, there were folks jumping in with questions from across, you know, the board members and staff that were present, you know, so it didn't necessarily feel like, it felt like there was just more engagement with the board members there as well. Catherine.
Yeah, I'm echoing both of you, but I wanted to say that my first year I was exhausted and spread thin. And this year I felt like I could really dig down and come up with quality questions because I could focus so much more. And these were things that, even though these are all great organizations, these were the ones that I was really invested in. So I was excited to talk to all of them, and I could come to them fresh and energized. So I really appreciated what we did this year, and I'd like to continue with it.
Chiquita,
Awesome.
or Councilwoman Yarborough.
Yeah, when I saw that the hearings, the applications and stuff were separate. Oh, let me take my hand down. Les, I thought that was awesome because I remember, you know, going through all those applications and reading them and scoring and all of that. It was a lot. The one thing that I'm wondering, and you all can let me know because I didn't go through this new process with you. How would it be if maybe next cycle you all switch up and get a different interest? Just to switch it up so that someone else can kind of, one thing I loved about this board and reading all those applications, that it was so much I didn't know. So many nonprofits, I realized what nonprofits were actually doing. So that was the advantage of going through all those applications, because I did learn a lot. But when you concentrate on what your interests are and you focus on that, and that's awesome, that's good, because you're passionate about it. But then you also miss those opportunities to learn a little bit more. So I'm just wondering, what are you all thinking? Maybe the next cycle get a different one, possibly? I don't know. It's just kind of like us with the being on city council. We have to, you know, I'm on this board, right? I'm the liaison. So we get to switch up instead of us stand on the same boards for 4 years, you know? Every year we get to switch up. So it's important that we learn about what's going on within all the boards. And so I kind of feel the same way with the nonprofit. I'm not saying, that's just a question that I'm asking. What do you all think about that?
Anyone have thoughts? I think it's a great idea.
Agreed, yep.
So next year we'll switch up, because we know who was on what, we have those records, so next year we'll change up.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
Robert
we
kind of
only
started,
have five areas, and if someone does three, and maybe it's that like, we agree that everyone's gonna do 3 hearings, 3 sets of hearings or something like that. And maybe you get your one of your top choices, but the other 2, we make sure folks are rotating or something. I think there's definitely ways we could do it to make sure we mix it up and folks are seeing across all of the agencies.
yeah, we can do that. Yeah, as we get closer to that, we can talk about that. So Robert kind of started the piece about wanting, so I added this question is, when we do the hearings, there's no pre-prepared questions. It's just, we kind of allow you to review the application. And then, whatever questions you like, to Graham's point, you read it and you come up with questions. Would it be helpful if we created some questions for you all to, bounce off of or think of? I mean, not that you have to use them, but would it be helpful to have some standard questions for the hearings?
To me, the questions are the things to which we're scoring.
Right.
And each individual applicant has different things that I need to ask of them to better respond to those score questions. So for me, the standard questions are the ones asked of me to score.
Right. So
And
like the
that-
program outcomes,
Exactly. Those are the questions. And
best
so-
practices, exactly. Okay.
Yep, and to the extent I can't answer them with the applicant's, application, that's where I need to figure out what I need to ask to better score. So that's my perspective.
Okay.
So this is not really on a standard question, sort of, but I think one thing, Eliberto, that you had folks do, and I don't remember at which point it was, but it was something different that I noticed from last year, in particular, was having the folks on the call introduce themselves and who they are, what they do with the organization, that type of thing, which I think we were just so busy last year that I think, we didn't necessarily get that. I think that's like that type of thing is really helpful. And I love the idea of even just having them do, I would say even like the 30-second elevator pitch of the program that they want funded. We could time limit it or whatever, but kind of getting that initial piece before we just jump right into questions, I think can sometimes be helpful.
So yeah, that's actually that's the last question, is what could make the hearings more useful. So adding 30-second elevator, and we can prepare, Brenda, when we do the invite, like we can actually put it in the invite saying, hey, come prepared with a 30-second spiel that you're going to do it right before the interview. We could do that.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. Any other things that you all think could make the hearings more useful as you look at scoring these programs?
Kim?
I felt like this year we had less time to score and submit between the hearings and the due date. I'm not sure if it was just me, but I felt like I needed a little bit more time.
Okay.
So the due date, either we start earlier or I guess we'd have to start earlier because the due date probably is pretty fixed, but
yeah, I used to look at the calendar. It could have been that the first Thursday was on November 1st, right? Like it happened. So a lot of times it has to do with that too. So, if we could have postponed our hearing, our deliberation meeting, we could have had more time. But, I think what ended up happening there is a piece of the calendar that the first Thursday was on the 1st, and then, we had whatever. It could have been something like that too. But
and it could have been just the hearings that I had happened to be towards the end of the process. So I think
that could be too.
Yeah, that's the only thing I can think of.
I think we always tried to give you all at least 2 weeks. That's always been kind of my goal, is to give you 2 weeks to do it. But if we need 3, then we just gotta, as we figure out next year's scheduling, we just gotta make sure that we work backwards and make sure they have at least 3 weeks. You know, and then, so I give you 2 weeks and I give myself a week and for me and Brenda, because we have to, you know, I try and do accountability by, I'll do the staff piece. So like this year we had Jeff Friesner and Carmen Ramirez do the scores with me, but Brenda took care of all your scores. All I did was at the end was add what she did, right? Just to keep the separation of duties. So she did all your scores. I did the staff scores, right? And so that way we each have our own assigned piece to make sure that, and then I checked her scores from what you guys sent and vice versa. And she checked my scores. We just wanted to give ourselves, because there's a lot of numbers. And it can get confusing after a while. So we do that to keep ourselves accountable and safe as we do all the tallying. Yeah, we can definitely work backwards on that.
One thing I think would be helpful. So, you know, Robert mentioned like some standard questions, and I think Graham kind of suggested that maybe, you know, some of that isn't necessarily as helpful. You know, I do think like, you know, there are some things where we could give ourselves sort of a, you know, here are questions to help you answer this score one. So like, you know, particularly if we have new folks come on the board, you know, one of the things that we ask is like, how well does this fit Longmont's priority areas? You know, I think, you know, folks who have reviewed it, if you reviewed applications once or twice, might have things that they're looking for in there. And so even just noting those and sharing that with the group that is doing, you know, the evaluations of the same priority area could be helpful. The other thing is like, I have no idea about everyone else here. I do think that there are some of us, and I won't like implicate myself, that read applications, you know, right before the hearing, or, you know, in some cases might be reading it during the hearings. I'm not saying that's me. I don't do that. But you know what I'm getting at though is that it could be helpful in those cases when people have a lot to read, is to, you know, sort of have a, hey, you know, the week before, here's some things that I'm wanting to ask across some of the you know, broadly with each other, or even just like a soft deadline for ourselves of like, hey, this hearing is coming up and it's these, you know, 15 organizations. Make sure you've jotted down 2 to 5 questions or something like that, just like as a kind of reminder to ourselves, so that we show up fresh and ready with questions. We definitely had a few instances where like we kind of struggled to like fill the 15 minutes even with questions. So
actually that brought up another question for me. Because you said 15, and there was a couple of nights that were, I mean, they were marathons. And me and Brenda and I were talking about this, and I'm wondering, you know, if we have a category that has 15, 16 applicants, does it make sense to add another night but make it shorter, or are you all okay with like doing the marathon 4 or 5 hour piece? Something to think about. I'm going to answer tonight, but I'm just going to throw it out there.
I think when we have long ones like that, we should schedule in like at least a dinner break or a, you know, something, because we generally haven't scheduled in, like even with a 2-hour one, 2 hours isn't that much, but like 2 hours and being able to have like a restroom break in there. Generally, I find that if people are on a call for more than about an hour and 15 minutes, people start tuning out.
Okay. Well, we'll talk more about this as we get closer to the season of.
Yeah, I would prefer the marathon ones because, you know, I'd rather do it one night than 2.
Okay.
I mean, it's just a question of scheduling your time, and I'd rather schedule one evening for that rather than 2 evenings.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to throw it out there because there was a few nights it's like, oh, is this ever going to end? It just felt like it was.
They were long.
They were long, long nights. So I wanted to, and again, we can have more discussion as we get closer to the hearing season, but I did want to put this in your mind. And I think the other question, I mean, there was a couple of times where it was just because of, and it happens. Because of scheduling issues, there was only one board member present and myself. I think we had a couple of those hearings. And I'm okay with that, but I just want to share that, when I talked about pros and cons, I think that's a little challenging when it's just, me and someone else doing it. And of course, Brenda running, making sure that we're recording and doing all that. So I just wanted to mention that was a little challenging at times when it was just two of us.
I will say, I do think that the hearings that had 3 board members, it was like a good balance. And so, if we are at like 1 or 2, I think that like we may be shortchanging applicants on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and like I said, I think we just want to make sure we had at least 2. I wanted to make sure at least every application had 2 board readers, and they did, and some had 3. That being said, just so you know, if it's 2 board members, it doesn't have to be publicly noticed. So that's something else to consider. But it is, I can say it was challenging when it was just 1, right? Because there was a lot of responsibility on that one board member to lead them. I mean, I had tons of questions this year for some reason. But yeah, that was a challenge.
Yeah.
Anything else on the hearings piece? All right, if not, I'm gonna stop sharing for now because I think this is really great information. Again, we don't have to vote on anything because we're just giving staff guidance. We're not, we will come back. We're just gonna take this information, digest it, and then come back later on with really dive into it further with the board as we get closer to that. I just wanted to do it since we were fresh from it. Wanted to get some feedback from you all. Okay, then the next thing, I think I'm also the last thing on the agenda. And I'm gonna have to.
Yes, the annual work plan.
So I need to find it on here. Excuse the messiness of our drive. We've already been told we're in the red. We've been told we need to reduce our files. Karen kept we kept stuff way back to 2010. So on some things. All right. 2022. So I wanted to share the work plan with everyone. Not that we always do this in January and February. That's typically when we do it, but I wanted to just share it tonight and get some feedback on it all right. So this is our annual work plan. We do this every year. We'll bring it back to you either in January or in February. We discuss the draft of the work plan in January. And then we usually approve it in February. But I wanted to go over with you just so that you know what's coming in 2023. I mean, we usually just copy this over and then just update. So for example, this year we had, of course, in January, we do new board member orientation and the election of officers. So Caitlin and Brian right now are current officers. We should be thinking about what happens next year.
Graham is
Sorry, Caitlin and Graham, sorry. And then, we had this year to talk about in February, we're going to discuss the unallocated human services funding. So I think what we do in February is to kind of clear up anything. I don't foresee, unless council, when I just finished the council com for the December 20th hearing or council meeting. I don't necessarily know that we're gonna be having unallocated funding. We already made a recommendation, and if council approves it, we don't need to do that. But really start thinking about what we want to accomplish in those first 2 months, because March through June sounds like it's gonna be a lot of CBDG home type of work. And so just wanted to share this with you and think, are there any other items that we want to add or that we want to change up for this coming year?
I don't see anything.
Okay. So we did the training in July, so I think. And we did pretty good about keeping to our work plan this year, I think overall. The one thing that I noticed that I didn't have a presentation on homesteading and HSBC this month. And I think I was supposed to. So my apologies for that. I'll get it in the January meeting. But I think other than that, I think we did pretty well with our annual work plan. So we all feel pretty good with that?
Yep.
Okay. All right. And I think that's all I had for our December meeting.
All right. Any other business from anyone?
Are we getting a new or an updated human service needs assessment done?
That's a great question. I need to talk to Molly. Because they're about to launch, I think, because so we are in alignment with their HUD mandated what's it called? I'm blanking on that big con plan. And the way that we did the human services needs assessment the last time that we did it is that we did it with them.
Mm-hmm.
And theirs was from 2020 to 2024. So they're about to launch, they're gonna start looking at it in 2023. So I will talk to Molly and come back to the board with their plans. Because they're mandated by HUD to do this comp plan, and we have piggybacked our human services needs assessment with their work, because theirs looks at not just human services needs, but they also look at housing needs and a whole wide variety of community needs. So that was the plan. And I'll talk to her to see whether if the board thinks that we need to do something else, maybe a little more local, maybe not as, the cool thing about theirs is that they do a lot of, primary data collecting. In other words, they have community meetings, they're open to the public where they, and so they do that with a consultant. I'll check with her about what their plans are for the 2024 comp plan.
Okay.
And then we can talk about, well, if we don't want to wait till 2024, we may not have the funds to do something like that, but can we do something on a smaller scale with just us staff?
Mm-hmm.
For example, could it be something as simple as creating a survey for our nonprofit partners, or putting it out, on our website or something like that?
Yeah.
So that's something that we could consider.
Okay, cool.
But again, I think Karen made a good choice in aligning with the comp plan, because it's a huge undertaking. There's so many staff from both City of Longmont, Boulder County, and Broomfield undertaking that big project.
Sweet, and then I have one more question. Didn't we discuss rethinking the formula around funding allocation
Yes,
for next year?
and we are, like I mentioned during the process review, I didn't put it into this because I know that we have made, I think in November, we're actually gonna drag Caitlin's husband into, she offered his services to help with that, because apparently he's very good with numbers and Excel, so yes,
Cool, okay,
that's definitely on the agenda.
awesome, thank you, Albert.
Yes, he's very good at Excel.
So, yes.
It's like magic. There's like magic in the background or something. I don't know.
So I appreciate the help. Any help I can get with Excel, I appreciate. I can do some simple stuff, but I can't create magic with Excel. All right.
All right. Any other questions or business to cover?
Yeah, I just want to say, I'm not sure the process yet because now we have a new council member. So we will have to like reallocate some of our boards and stuff. So this person can get some of the boards. So I'm not sure what's going to happen in this process. Because I have like 5 boards that I'm on.
Oh my God.
That's not even including the board of my personal volunteering. Yeah, and working every day.
Yes.
So anyway, I'm not sure. I just kind of I don't want it to be a surprise if for some reason this person or someone else has this board, is the liaison to the board. Hopefully I get to stay on. The other thing I want to know is if you all can email me or email Eliberto. We in February, I think we decided Tuesday at the city council meeting that we are having our retreat in February. And so right now we are trying to come up with some of the topics. We mentioned a few on Tuesday, but if there's anything that you all want us to discuss, a topic that you see that's very common, that's a really issue that we really need to address, because the public is invited to be at the retreat. But if there's anything that you all know, something that's a common issue that you've seen within those applications or with those nonprofits, think about that and shoot me an email, and I definitely will bring that up and at the retreat, because that's the time to really talk about that, right? And so I just wanted to give you all that opportunity to express yourselves through me. Hopefully I could do it right, but if you write it all out, I'll just read what you wrote. But anyway, oh, I forgot we're recording. Okay, let me act right. Anyway, so just saying, giving you all the opportunity to definitely, if there's anything, a common issue that you've seen with nonprofits or something new that has popped up this year, please let me know and I will bring that up and that we can maybe talk about that topic at the retreat.
Thank you, Shakita.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. If there's no other business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
Someone's got to move first.
I move.
And Robert seconded. See you
All
all
right.
in
Thank
January.
you very much, all.
Thank you.
How do I stop the recording on this thing?
Just to the very top where, well, no, actually, we're 3 buttons where it says more. Right here on the bottom.
Okay.
Stop recording.
All right. Good night.